Hello guys, my name is Sebastian Passion. Today I will go through sibling component communication through services. So in this case, let's go ahead and start and create our first service. So ng generate service, let's call it my first service. Yeah, once this is done, jump into the service. So today we're going to talk about either behavior subjects or regular subjects, and we're going to distinguish the differences between them and different patterns that you can use. So let's go ahead and call my BS, not bullshit, but behavior subject in this case. Let's call it, it's going to be a string and give it a default value to an empty string. So my sub, this is a subject. It's quite similar, but yet different. The differences between the subject and the behavior subject is essentially that the behavior subject actually stores the value, so you can access it in afterhand. So for instance, this my sub, you cannot fetch the value from my sub, but if you go to my behavior subject, you can actually fetch the value from my behavior subject. So this is useful in case you want to persist the data. So if you want to persist the data, for instance, you're loading a new component and you want to be able to refetch it in some way, this might be a good thing. All right, so in the first case, we're going to look at the my behavior subject. So behavior subjects. This is a very common pattern. And what I've essentially done is I've injected two child components into the parent component, but we're going to look at sibling components. So we're going to look at communications from this one to this one. So it's essentially siblings. They're siblings to each other. So currently the name is child component as for the part one that we did. So the first thing we want to go ahead and do is we want to add a constructor and we want to private my first service. We're going to inject the service that we actually called, and this is through the Angular's dependency injection that we get for free, which is quite awesome. So what you can do now is you can say, hey, my first service dot my behavior subject as observable subscribe val and then you will have the value in this way. Okay, and you can console log it. We can print it. We're going to say we're going to create a new variable saying, hey, my service value, just for easiness of it. So this dot my service value equals to val, and always as a rule of thumb, remember to always type everything. So now whenever we receive a change in the behavior subject, it will transmit it. We will define it to be my service value, and then we can just print my service value here like this. So currently it's defined to be nothing. So if you would say hey, it's going to say hey, so it's the default value that it receives now. Now we want to trigger the change when click or when essentially pressing this button. So when we press the button, we want to be able to send data between siblings or wherever, whatever is subscribing to the, like it could be parent, it could be child, it could be grandchild, it could be siblings. In this case, we are essentially looking at siblings. So now we have set up this subscription. We're subscribing to it. Whenever we receive a value, we'll transmit it. But now we need to do a similar thing for this one. So we need to say, hey, this my first service, my behavior subject, and we need to say next value. We call it my new value as we had in the example before. So whenever I press the button, it should receive the new value and it should be my new value. So as you can see, it's transmitted through the siblings. It's connected in this way through the service and it all both subscribes to the actual value. So this, for me, it's a good pattern implemented wrongfully because you don't want to be able to actually do this. This is very dangerous in my case. Because imagine you have 10 different components that you have and every component that you have is essentially changing the value, which means that when you're debugging in the future, you won't have an idea, like it will be very difficult for you to actually understand which one of them actually transmits this value. So a very common pattern to this would be to, if you go into the service, we create, hey, we say this is private. You cannot change it by any means from outside here. We call, let's call my string and define it always with a dollar sign if you're going to define something that's going to be unobservable. So we are going to do this, so we don't have to do it in the other components. So we're going to say this dot my behavior subject, and we're going to do it as an observable. It will not longer be possible from the child. As you can see here, we can no longer access it from here, which is good. Uh, so what you would do in this case is essentially change text. All right, so and let's say my new value. This is what you want to do. You want to have a function, so you have a single source of changing the behavior subject. It will be much easier, trust me, even though it might be easy to do it as well from the component. This is the way you should do it. So hey, you're going to say my new string, and then you're going to say hey, my behavior subject next new string. So we will have this behavior subject converted into an observable, and whenever the behavior subject is changed, it will also transmit this event to my string. So we can now listen to my string for changes. And when we change it from the service and not from each and single component that we have. It will be much easier for debugging purposes, as I mentioned. So this is the way to actually communicate between siblings. You could also add the attached listener here to the parent. So let's say my first service, so we inject the service here as well. It's required to do it. So we'll subscribe to it here, and we can say, hey, val, it's going to be a string, my service value string, or just define it to be an enter like this. Then you don't have to write a type. It's self-written. So what you can do is you can have the exact same behavior here. And this is the nice thing with behavior subjects. So if I would change this, this is the difference between subject and behavior subject. If I would change it in this way, um, it would act exactly the same. All right, guys, thank you. That was it for the video. Please comment, share, subscribe, leave any comments if you think I can improve anything, something you would like me to do. Just feel free to leave a comment below. Thank you guys for watching in this video.